to ask you what dollar value impact ArcSite has had on your business. What would you say?
All in all, it's probably a good $1 million to our gross rev.
Steve, we'll start off nice and easy. Can you just introduce yourself with your name and your title?
Yes, my name is Steve Ball. I guess I wear many titles. Own a few different businesses, and also still work for a fire department as well as a captain.
Oh, very cool. Many hats then.
Yeah,
So tell me about Michigan Gutters. How did you guys get started?
yeah. So Michigan Gutters. I guess the long story short is, like I said, I've been a firefighter first. So I actually went to school for fire science, got my paramedic degree when I was a very, very young man at 22. And I got out of there and kind of went to Traverse City, Michigan. And that's where we kind of set up. I got hired at the fire department there. And with that schedule, we work 24-hour shifts. So I, like most guys in the fire service, we have a lot of days off. It's long days when we're there, but we have a lot of days off. So most of us hustle and try to make some extra money, and that's what I did. I started hanging gutter with a retired firefighter from Detroit, and we would just kind of help him hang it and assist him. He'd give us cash, and we did that for a couple of years, and then kind of sometime down that line, he was getting older at that time, and kept it really small, just kind of a local thing. And he ended up getting sick and passing away. And it kind of gave an opportunity with his ex-wife. There had an old gutter machine and some stock, and just kind of wanted it gone. So I went there, and we kind of worked out a deal, and she let me just make little payments, and I woke up a business owner. So didn't know anything about it, didn't know even how to estimate, didn't know anything about anything other than just holding a piece of gutter up and putting a screw in. So I immediately, this is about 2008, so I immediately just went to Google, and I tried to learn everything I possibly could on this business called gutter installation. So I actually hooked into a good guy. I reached out to the guy doing it the best in the area, and that was Tony Cobb, who actually introduced me to ArcSite as well. But he was on the Grand Rapids area, and he kind of took me under his wing. We weren't in that area, that market, and he really helped me out and kind of helped establish the business side of it for me. And we grew with a lot of hard work, and I would work the fire department, and then I'd get off the fire department, and I'd go install gutter and estimate till after dark, and kind of my wife would take the phone calls, and we kind of grew the business from there. So we started from scratch pretty much, and till today we're around $5 million in gross rev. So it grew pretty quick. So part of that was getting the right people in the right places, and I still actually work for the fire department. So a lot of times I'm not available. So we got really good people that can make things happen.
Amazing. What a story. That's so cool. I guess talk to me then about the size of your business today. Obviously, you are wearing a completely different hat, working at the fire department as well as running this business. And being an entrepreneur by itself is already a dozen different hats to wear. So you're even one-upping that realm a little bit. But yeah, who works with you in the business? How many employees do you have? What does a typical day look like for you all?
Yeah, no. So today we have, we probably have in Michigan Gutters probably 25 employees right now. So that gets a little complicated too. We also own a door company. So I end up getting a garage door company as well. So we do have some, and it's a totally separate company, but we do have some shared personnel on that like an HR director that I share. So exclusively with Michigan Gutters, we have probably about 25 right now. And typical day is, we have, for me, I don't operate anymore in the operations of it. I do mostly on the background. I'll do a lot of the finance. I did go get my MBA, which really made a big difference. So I do a lot of the strategy, how to grow it, how to remain consistent throughout the winter. We have a very cold climate. Like right now, we have about 2 foot of snow on the ground, so that makes it a little difficult to install gutter. So we got into some other things. So we do heat systems. We do ice removal. So we'll actually steam ice off roofs so they don't have ice dams. And then we do everything gutter, of course. So it all kind of wraps together, but it keeps our guys employed. And so right now our day is very busy because they take calls in the morning. And like I said, we're steaming ice right now, which is a service. So we have a lot of people that are calling with water coming into their houses, and that's never a good thing. So we're scrambling. We have a real good gal that kind of does all the scheduling, and she sets that up, and then we send out the crews. So the crews go out. We have a couple other staff that help with that, coordinate it, and they come back. They usually work right now from 8 to 5-ish, but we do pay on performance as well. So that's kind of a neat little thing. So basically, they're getting a percentage of that ticket. So their days can kind of vary. Some are long, some are less, but ultimately it's kind of up to them and how much work they want to do. So, and
that's
it's,
awesome.
yeah.
Whenever I speak to folks that are in like the northern part of the country this time of year, I'm like, don't look out my window.
Yeah, right.
I almost feel embarrassed. I'm like, it's 70 degrees here in California.
Yeah, you don't want to see my window.
I mean, it's beautiful with the snow and stuff, but yeah, you need to be made of tough stuff to be living up there. And I'm sure your customers are happy that they have you guys to rely on to help them with all the things that winter weather brings.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about sort of your journey into entrepreneurship, because obviously you have a career as a fire captain. You've pursued that as like your main line of work. What was sort of stirring up in you when you decided to sort of like do this thing on the side? Like, I actually want to maybe do something else outside of this. I want to start up my own business as well.
Yeah, kind of neat. Like I said, I got into the fire service when I was like 22, right out of college. So I was, not knowing much of anything other than the college lifestyle, right? So I learned real quick, the value of customer service, and we were making, life and death decisions every day, and at age 22 for me. So that kind of set the tone for me. I just I thrived in that environment. I enjoy stress, which sounds kind of crazy, but if I'm not stressed, I'm not I'm not doing things. So
Fair.
So that kind of that set the tone for that environment. Now the thing with that, working for a government, it was nice. I had a fallback, right? So I had a career, I had a job, I could support my family. That I had a young family as well. We started having children, and so we were able to kind of support ourselves off that. And I deferred a lot of that income, or I didn't take income for a decade, in fact, while we were growing the company. So so that helped a lot. And then I guess ultimately, I said, dealing with gutters, you're dealing with or any service industry, you're dealing with people that could be upset at time, right? But it was never. I was real familiar with dealing with people upset, right, or seeing people upset. So I always made it right with them. Customer service was always very important, and at the end of the day, no one was dying, right? So we would make it right with them, and grew a really good reputation off that, and just grew from there. Nothing kept us off track. We were pretty focused, and I think to this day, we still have that perspective. We're going to do the best we can. We're very customer service focused. If we mess something up, we're going to fix it at our cost. So, you do that a few times where it gets around, and we install now for a lot of the new builds, a lot of builders, a lot of contractors. And that's purely from our reputation of taking care of things when things aren't always right. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was reading about you guys before we hopped on this call, and everything that you Google and see online is just like do stellar work, really like hardworking, like really cares about their craft, and everything you just said, lines up with that. Like I've worked in corporate for a long time, and one of my first jobs was in PR, and the one thing that we used to say, it's PR, not ER. Nobody's dying. There's no crisis happening because XYZ thing went wrong, and I think with the experience that you have, you're bringing a really like good perspective, right? Because in your role as a fire, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny because my wife is totally opposite, right? Like she's the organizational piece to this mess, right? I mean, I'm the visionary. I do a lot of the, like I said, handle that kind of stuff, but she's the organizational piece to that. And anytime we have a major, if you will, somebody unhappy, that's usually my first question. Is anyone dying? No. Okay. Yep. Well, let's deal with it. And, and just like you said, that's so important because I see a lot of business owners, they don't take that same approach. And ultimately it can harm your business because you don't grow with that, right? What's the ratio of one bad review like leads to 7 lost customers, something like that. So we take a lot of pride in that and ownership in that for sure.
Absolutely. I want to pivot now a tiny bit and talk about how you guys found ArcSite. So I know you mentioned that your previous business partner introduced you to the tool. So talk to me what your workflow was like before ArcSite and then how you found the tool.
Yeah, actually it was, again, Tony Cobb with All Gutter Systems down in Grand Rapids. We weren't partners, but he just kind of helped me out. And, so we became friends from that point. We've bought product back and forth and stuff throughout the years. But he ultimately introduced me to this new tool that was kind of neat. And we were drawing on tablets and I just love that. For years, I personally have been trying to come up with something better than just a pad of paper and a pen, especially as you're scaling, right? We have 5 estimators now, and trying to get their vision onto a piece of paper so the ops folks can determine that, order material off that, and then ultimately have the installers install on that piece of paper is very difficult. And that's one reason why gutter installation is hard to scale. It's a very complicated process. So ArcSite did help with that. He introduced that to me, and I said, "Wow, this is amazing. We could work with this." And at the time, there's a young guy was working there with him, and I believe he ultimately went to ArcSite and kind of helped design that. And then I internally, like I said, we have a couple other different businesses now, but we have an IT lady that is phenomenal. So she came from the computer world and writing code and whatnot. So she's very, very, very fluent in that type of work. And that kind of, the light bulb went off, right? So we took what we were given at the time or shown, and actually a lot of the symbols that ArcSite uses now and even some of the things came from our office, which is kind of cool. So she helped design that to fit our model. And at the time, besides Tony, we were the first gutter company to use it. So we took it and made it work for how we do things. I really, really enjoy the how it would cost in the background. So as we would draw, the estimators would draw, it would kind of cost in the background and give a price that was consistent. So it was very consistent that way. It was clean. You didn't have somebody scribble trying to decipher what that meant. We had symbols for things, so they knew what to put where. And we worked with ArcSite quite a bit, and they were, on those beginning days, it was they were great at kind of adjusting to fit our need, and then ultimately, I think it made something that was pretty unique and sellable for ArcSite.
That's awesome. One of the things I'm a fairly new joiner to ArcSite. I joined about 3 months ago here, and one of the things I really enjoy about the culture here is that we're very much in partnership with our customers. Like if someone raises their hand and said, "I want X, Y, and Z," there's a lot of care to be like, can we do that, and how fast can we do that? So, sounding like you were one of the kind of like foundational companies that helped spin up the capabilities for gutters. So, what was that early days like when you first implemented the tool and got your team to start using it?
Basically, it was kind of fun. In my, I'm a tactical, operational kind of guy, right? So like, we'd have a question like, I wanted to do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't have but these really smart guys did. And so, I would work through Heather on my side and say, hey, I wanted to do this and that and look like that. And she would kind of relay the message and speak computer nerd. And, they would spit out a product that was really cool. So it was a game changer for us, I guess, would be the big thing. I mean, it was a hard sell. Our guys were like, we're not interested in, going away from paper, right? Because that was how we did business. And it was going to take more time in their mind. Well, probably a year after the first year, once we implemented, they found it actually saves a lot of money for us. In a lot of callbacks and just operational error. So, and that took, the first year, that first few years we spent kind of critiquing it. They also, ArcSite was really good about giving us a back-end platform to kind of work with. So I know my Heather on the back end, she was kind of adjusting things, adding symbols, making it work real specific for us. So, it was fun. It was a good time. And like I said, it really, really upped our game. When we would send an estimate or show an estimate versus the competitor showing an estimate, it was hands down. You would even pay a little more to have that professionalism. You'd see it and say, wow, these guys know what they're doing. At least it looked
absolutely.
Like. So, yeah.
I guess tell me a little bit more about that. Like when you first started, rolling this out and like showing customers their digitized proposals and it's all connected, the drawing, reflects the price really accurately. What was some of the reactions that you got?
They loved it, but it was the way we utilized it. It was hard to decipher at that time, like what was what. So since then, we created like keys, and we've made it more simple process, and it's more that the average homeowner now can look at it and say, oh, that's the front of the house, and that's what you mean. So we use the pictures. That was a big part of that, where you can take pictures through the app now, and we attach pictures to it. We can even draw on the pictures, and that all helps for that customer that maybe just doesn't understand it or see it. To be honest, I use it a lot too for if there is a disagreement, if there is well, I thought I should have had this part done, or maybe you weren't supposed to do that part. Well, once we send that out, it shows it fairly clear on where we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to do. So it really did clear up a lot of that what if, or some of those issues between the installation and sometimes even the estimators. So.
For sure. You mentioned earlier that it's helped you with cost savings just operationally. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it's done in that regard?
A couple things with cost. One thing I always want to be consistent, right? I mean, that's our companies. Everything we do is, I always say it's on a per foot per item basis. So we don't whether you're living in a mega mansion here, on the water, or you're living in a smaller home somewhere in the woods, it doesn't matter. The price is going to be the price. So now we have tiers and different things for that, but the system is built that way. And ARC helped us organize that. So it wasn't one estimator doing one thing one way, another one doing another way, and us not even knowing that. So when we put that system in play, we know that every time you draw that 6-inch gutter, the price is going to be the same no matter where you're at, what you're at, as long as it's, the same price or the same type of item that we're using. So that saved us money, or I should say made us more money, because there was less mistakes, right? So you're not forgetting certain things, and you're not trying to use math. In the back, they used to have to try to figure, they were adding this stuff in their head, or, on their toes, whatever they were doing. And, it was, sometimes they'd mess it up, or it'd be less or more. And it wasn't real consistent. And this added that consistency. And now the price book I like, because we do adjust that. Like right now, we just got a price increase on aluminum. Aluminum has been kind of all over now. It keeps going up. So we can go in the system. We can simply, Heather can just simply change the costing, and then it just happens, right? So they don't even know it needs to have it. Just as they draw it, they don't even necessarily know what the price is at that time until after, right? It just kind of happens in the background. So that's really been good that way. So, and also it helps us detail out, like if somebody wants, hey, what would it be if I add this piece? Or maybe I have a barn and I'd like to add that, but I don't know if I want to pay for that. We can draw that up, and it will, tell you the cost right then and there.
Exactly. Just giving your customers more clarity into it. I think like every homeowner, obviously it's everybody's hard-earned money. People are, trying to do the most that they can with their dollar these days. And I think just clarity in terms of like what you're getting for a service, and just being, very transparent with that, just builds so much trust, and it's evident.
And it is trust, because that's another important thing. We're not price gouging. We always would say that, it is the price is the price. So, other than discounts that we may run here and there, I mean, we know exactly what it would be. And actually another thing that really did was it pulled in our office staff together. Now, so when they would call, or a customer would call and our office staff would get that call, they could actually handle some of that workflow because they could pull up the estimate and actually, take a piece off or add a piece based on that. So it did make the workflow easier as well, and communication better ultimately.
That's wonderful. If I had to ask you what dollar value impact ArcSite has had on your business, what would you say?
All in all, it's probably a good $1 million to our gross rev. Now that may be a little audacious, but it's there was a couple things that happened right at that time. Like I said, it just made us more efficient, made us follow through with pricing. Inventory on the back end got better, inventory control. So, we went up from there to there well over $1 million, but I'd say $1 million of that impact had to do with just the processes that we put in place.
Let's say there's another, young gutters company coming up watching this, and they're curious, like, what does your workflow look like inside of ArcSite? Could you kind of walk me through that?
So what we do is we have another lady that she's kind of our sales coordinator. So when she gets the call, or the calls go to her, she goes automatically in there. She creates a file through ArcSite, so it's got the name, all the information, takes all the information needed, right? And then she'll go and she puts that into the ArcSite, the database, I guess you would call it. So it's already in there. And then she'll schedule up the estimator, right? So the estimator goes out, he goes to the site, and he literally searches for that address, name, pulls it up, and there's their file, if you will. Okay. So from that file, he starts all the pertinent information that was given to him will be him or her on there. So, there may be a couple notes. We may have some things that they need to know, or maybe they're not there when they're estimating. So she may have some other notes in there that we put in there on the ArcSite. And then from there, he goes through and draws, takes his pictures. It all goes into the program. He either closes it out. Most of our estimates now, they get sent later versus right on site. I like to have them on site, and sometimes we still do that, but a little more complication now with pictures and in the job. We're doing all kinds of different types of gutter too. We're not just doing 5-inch gutter anymore. So we got half round and 8-inch, all kinds of stuff. So he'll put in all the pertinent information, take the pictures, go in his tablet, go back to the office at some point, and then they'll pull that back up, and then they'll fine tune the estimate. Any additions that they need to do. Our ArcSite is set up to where it's like, every little line item is a different piece. So it's not just one number. They're going to know every little piece that we're putting into that estimate. And then ultimately it's going to have the price at the end of it. And then she'll put that in that platform and send it.
There's 1,000 different ways to slice it. So it's always useful to hear just like how you're doing it. Obviously you've had a ton of success, which is why we're here today chatting to you. So always good to know exactly what the like nitty gritty of it looks like. I want to pivot now a little bit and just talk about, your business growth in the future. Where do you see yourself in the business in 5, 10 years time?
I will be retiring from the fire department at some point soon. So okay. I've been there 24 years. So,
wow.
So that's happening soon. So, what's that mean for us and myself? We've scaled Michigan gutters quite a bit, and I think there's a little bit more that we can scale to in the area. But our next step would be maybe going outside our area. And that may be, opening up a couple other shops. I'm not 100% sure how that's going to look. My focus right now is to lean out and get prepared for, I guess what that future looks like. Technology helps. ArcSite is one of those, like I said, platforms that we utilize. And so the better we can get, the more efficient we can be helps. I said earlier, I'm a little bit of a serial entrepreneur. We got into a lot of properties. So we do a property management company and also a garage door company as well. So we actually got into some gutter supply as well. So lots of different things we're kind of dabbling in now. But as far as for Michigan gutters, it kind of stands on its own 2 feet. I'm kind of working myself out of a job, to be honest with you. So
honestly, that's the marker of a successful business, right? It runs itself, right, and you get the time to do what you want to do.
Yep, exactly.
Like you just said, you're a serial entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So my other question to you is, what's your favorite thing about being an entrepreneur?
Man, so I love, like I said, the stress of building something, and I love the seeing the fruits of your labor as well. So when I love watching our folks be successful, raise families off it, and buy houses and all the stuff that's great about living in this country, and that you can do this, right? And it just takes a lot of hard work. So I really enjoy that. And that's kind of what keeps me going is, I like the stress of knowing that I need to, we have to put food on the table for folks. And like in Northern Michigan right now, we have to, most gutter companies, in cold climates, they close up, and, their folks will either go on unemployment or have to find something else. And I just never like that. So we keep them fully employed and with benefits and everything else. So that puts a lot of pressure on making sure that we find work and good work. So, I guess that's the big thing that drives me.
Absolutely. It's all about looking after your people, right? Like, because, a job, a company, a career, it's all just community. It's all just people that you care about. And you work with, the same people day in and day out. Sometimes you spend more time with the folks you work with than you do with your own family. If you could travel back in time to mm-hmm. when you first started and give yourself advice, what would your biggest piece of advice be?
Man, I would say don't quit, and that's... And I don't think we did. So it's not like advice that we weren't. I'm glad I didn't, right? I mean, but I see a lot of young entrepreneurs that they get attracted to that golden ticket, or, the new car, or the fancy this or that, and they want that now, right? So I always say, I have these conversations now, and it's really duration. It's persistence, duration of doing the right thing. And if I had to give anyone advice, that's what I would say myself. I did do that. And a little bit by necessity at that time, we put ourselves in kind of a rocky position, because we were growing so quick and trying to make payroll with credit cards. And so I guess if I had advice for myself, I would say, hey, let's be a little smarter about this and, not try to grow. So I was real focused on growth, which was good, but I didn't really have the pieces in place at that time. So I didn't have, I didn't have relationships with banks. I didn't have any of the stuff that eventually you have to have. Lines of credit, those type of things that are important for a business, especially a service type business like ours. So I would look back and tell myself to slow down and do a little more strategic. I mean, we made it, but it was, there was some trying times for sure.
Absolutely. But the wisdom you got from those trying times is,
Yep.
Especially these days. I think there's a lot of culture around like, oh, just go run your own business. Don't, work traditional 9 to 5, whatever. But like, there's always trade-offs, right? Like then really all the pressure is on your back and your back alone. And you're trying to make payroll, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to make, all of these decisions that you probably, there's no handbook on like, here's how you become an entrepreneur. So
it's another big thing for me, I kind of mentioned, I didn't know anything about business. I was just a hard worker. I was a firefighter. So, I mean, I worked. That's what I did. And that's what I knew. And looking back, I went and got my MBA during, which I wouldn't suggest. That was a lot of work, but it really, really opened my eyes to business. And it was kind of, I guess, good in that part of it. And I was sitting in class, I was probably 28, 29 at the time, but I was in class with, 22-year-olds. So who didn't have any kind of experience, super smart people, but didn't have the experience where I had a lot of experience, bad experience, good, just kind of, so we used a lot of mission gutter projects in class. So that was kind of neat, but, and it really helped me once I understood my financials. And I guess that would be another little piece of advice I'd say is get good at financials. And if you can go through your P&Ls and your balance sheet and understand what those number means and put those to, the KPIs and ratios. That's what I spend a lot of my time on now. But if I knew that then, it would have been a game changer because I would have did, that's what guides should guide all your decision making. And, that's to this day, most small businesses don't even know what that is.
Yep.
So, they give it to their accountant and say, hey, figure this out, but they just kind of go with the flow. But I try to make data-driven decisions now. So
absolutely. I think a lot of folks can get intimidated by it, right? Like, there's some people love math, a lot of people don't, right? And then they're like, I can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. There's this sort of like fear of like learning how to do it. But if you just get the basics down, it really gives you a lot of mileage in what you're able to do with growing your business in that regard.
Yeah, it really did. And then, work hard. Like I said, I worked 10, or I was going, for a long time, it was 100 hours a week. That's insane. But, I was working 24-hour shifts at the fire department. And then, I'd come home and we'd work, sun up, sun down. So that was a little much. I wouldn't advise that. I mean, that gets that life balance is important. But, like I said, I kind of put ourselves in a maybe not a good position because we had to do that. We had no choice. So, but it worked.
During those days, how do you, I guess, deal with burnout or tiredness or just keep yourself going? Because the 100-hour week is no joke for years on it.
To be honest, I don't think I was smart enough not to. So it just, I didn't. I mean, it just, like I said, I just kind of, we were brought up pretty humble beginnings. So I mean, our family never had a whole lot, but we worked hard, right? I watched my dad work hard his whole life, and I just knew with hard work I could make it. So, and that's what I knew, and that's what I did. And one thing that was kind of neat that happened that really was pivotal for me is I used to do all and this is common with most small business owners too. I had to be there to do all the work, right? Because nobody does it as good as me. Nobody cares. And it's hard to scale past that, right? Well, in my case, I had done that for a couple of years and I was doing everything. And I fell off a ladder and broke my hands. So that was in that tragic event. It forced me to pull out. I had no other option other than let other people run my company or do the work of the company. And that's when we really hit a whole nother level, because I had to back out, and then all of a sudden I had to start thinking, well, how do we make this work through someone else, right? And not me. And that was a big moment. And from there we started hiring, the right people, and come to find out, a lot of them do it way better than I could and did. So, that was good. Find smarter people, put them on the right seats on the bus. So,
absolutely.
And that's what happened. So that was a big moment for me.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's by necessity or by design, but and it's obviously awful, but the place that it got you to be able to step back from the business is ultimately great for, your own work-life balance and being able to step away and do other things, and also the growth of your business. My last question for you is, how do you define success?
It's really not about money. It's about achieving your goals. So achieving what you set out to do. And I think that's really what it's about is for me personally, like I said earlier, success for me is watching others succeed, if that makes sense. So watching families be formed and survive off this and make it and buy, like I said, we had one young guy just buy a house, build a house, and he works for us, works hard, great guy. I love that, or when they're, doing what they want to do and are happy and excited. And then I know that we built that, right? So for me, that's success, and that's what drives me. So it's not about, the money or anything like that per se. It's actually watching it grow and achieving those goals that we set out to do. So if I want to be the best in gutter installation company in the U.S., so we're gonna strive to be that.